Hello and welcome to today's web demo with DataFirst. My name is Dennis Schiraldi and I am going to be your host for today's event. Our attendees are in listen-only mode and will have the ability to interact with us through both the web chat and the Q&A. We want to make sure that this is interactive as we possibly can. So that said, if you do have any questions throughout the course of today's live recorded web demo, please go ahead and position those into either the chat and or the questions. Thank you again for everybody for being here. This is a live recorded web demo by Brad Keeter. He's an R&D and demo specialist with DataFirst. This is a overview, high-level demo of the Silverback Workflow Engine. In the event that you want to get a more deeper dive and more specific into it, we will go ahead and we'll follow up with you for a more detailed version. In the meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and start the web demo. If you have any issues, just do me a favor once we get going here. If you can see my screen and hear us, just make sure that you raise your hand.
All right, guys. Well, hello and welcome to our Silverback Workflow Engine demo. As Dennis mentioned, I am Brad Keeter, and I'm going to be presenting the demo. Just to get started, though, for you to know, the Silverback Workflow Engine is hosted on a Windows Server operating system. Generally, it's going to be Server 2016 or better. And then we're going to be a SQL Server database backend. Installation for Silverback generally is going to be 15 to 20 minutes, so it's fairly quick. That is assuming, though, that SQL is installed. If we say we needed to install SQL, that is going to take the general probably 20 minutes that SQL normally does take to install. But after that, then it's really just the configuration aspect of Silverback that can take not a long time because you're just going to be setting up your listening ports. But if you had multiple destinations, and once we get into some of the additional workflows like logic profiles and tag mappers and stuff, but it generally is really pretty quick. But when you actually open up to the Silverback UI, you're going to be posting to a URL. So you'd be able to access this from any of your individual workstations. So you don't have to go to a native server that it's installed on, or it could be installed just in your VM farm. Either one would be acceptable. But this is going to be your login screen, and you can make individual user logins for whoever you needed. So if I just click submit here, it's going to log me into the Silverback UI. And in this UI, it's going to initially present to you your association manager. And what an association manager is it's going to be your inbound associations, which would be all of the modalities that have been sending studies in. You would see all those studies or those associations in this inbound associations tab. The outbound associations tab would show you everything that has gone out from the router. So whether you're sending to one destination or 10 destinations, you're going to see all of those listed here. And you're going to see a status of if they were complete, if they happen to fail, something might have been excluded, etc. And we'll get into that more here in a little bit. I actually don't want to start with the configuration of a router. A router really is just going to be your listening ports. So if you have a router set up to listen on this example, port 2010, all the modalities that are being sent will send into port 2010. We would accept that association from them, and then we will be able to forward out to one destination or multiple destinations, whatever your configuration is. I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit one of these so that you can kind of see how it would look. So when I'm building a router, I'm going to tell it, do I want it to be a study type or an association type router? With a study type router, this router is going to actually have a delay in sending the images over to the destination. What it's going to do is it gets that association, and if that modality sends over 10 instances and then closes the association, and if it doesn't get another association for, say, 30 seconds, it's at that point going to send those studies over to your target. Because a router doesn't know when a study is complete. So we're going to try just to manage the associations to your destination so it doesn't get overwhelmed with single instances. In an association-based router, it's going to get that association from the modality. And if that modality sends one instance in that association, or if it sends 100 instances in that association, as soon as that association closes, it's going to post it and send it over to the destination. There's going to be a default state for your router where everything can go into what's a ready state. So it's just going to send immediately, or a stage state. This would be where if you wanted your admins to come in and maybe QC all the studies before they get sent to the destination. I've seen this used more for research, etc., where they want to just post and look at the studies before actually sending them into a destination. When you're setting up, you'd give your router a description name. So you may have a router that's for one clinic and another one for another clinic. So you could give those names, or maybe a cardiology route, a radiology route, a peds route, a mammo route, etc. So you'd make all those individual just so that you could simply get in and differentiate between all the different ones. Your router would have an AE title, and that AE title is going to be the AE of the router. So of that listing port router. And when it sends over then to the destination, it could either send over the router AE title, or there's going to be an option later on where it can send over the modality's AE title or the source's AE title. This would be that listening port that we had discussed. And then you have your caching location. The caching location is going to be where Silverback stores all of its images that it's accepting from these associations. With Silverback, it's not just doing a pass-through. It's actually going to store the instances to the cache. And in case it happens to fail to one of the destinations, you can just come right back to your router and resend that study. You don't have to go back to the modality or the source and resend it. You could do it directly from here. So from your own workstation, you'd be able to do that. And then you can set your purge interval days. So how many days do you want studies to be actually cached on the router? You could do 7 days, you could do 30 days. It just depends on the amount of cache that you want and how often you're getting in and reviewing the studies, just in case you did have to resend anything. And then there's a retry count. If 1,000 instances are sent into the router from the modality and the target accepts 900 of them, it's going to attempt to send those extra 100 up to 2 times in this instance before it says it to a failed state. And if it does go to a failed state, there's going to be a multitude of troubleshooting that you can do from the router, because it's going to log any of the errors that were posted from that destination. Your router can be in a promiscuous mode. So any modality that connects to it is going to accept that connection, and then it's going to forward it on. If you did not want it to be promiscuous, you'd have to actually come in here, put in the AE title, put in the IP address for those modalities for it to actually accept that connection. We can send as received as per association. We will auto create these source modalities into the database. So what that means is a modality connects to us, we're going to log that AE title. And then if you needed to say audit what modalities are sending through the router or anything, it's going to be accessible. Remember target. The router is going to remember what target it sent a study to. So say you had a system that had multiple storage nodes. We can do the load balancing out to those storage nodes, and we could say round robin through all those storage nodes. Well, if a study UID comes in and it sends to storage node 1, and then 10 minutes later, that same study UID with more instances comes in, it's going to remember that that study went to node 1 and it's going to send it to that same node. We also have the impersonate AE title. So oftentimes you're not going to want to go to 800 different modalities and reconfigure them. So what we could do here is you could either have the router impersonate an AE title, or we can just check this impersonate here and say your modality is calling DataFirst RT. Okay, it's going to accept that. But if you have impersonate, if that modality calls Brad, we're going to impersonate and we're going to say, yes, this is Brad, and we're going to accept that connection. The next tab here is going to be your router sources. So as I was saying earlier, we are going to document all the modalities that are sending through to your router so you can come in and do any manipulation. Compression profiles are very important within your router. We will either take the instances or the associations from the modality as is, or we can set up a compression profile where we're going to try to negotiate what compression we want to get from that modality. So if that modality offers us lossless, we are going to say, yes, we'll take that lossless. But if they only accept us ELE, we are going to accept it because it's in our accepted list. But we could also try to set a profile for a specific modality. So say you had one modality that was older, couldn't send a specific compression profile. You could say, hey, give this one to me in ELE. Everyone else, give it to me in lossless. So there's multiple different options there. You could also on inbound set like a scheduler. If you only wanted to accept connections from a specific modality or from any modalities from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., you could set up a different time profile. Different presets, different rules. If you want to blank out accession numbers or not take in any accession numbers that are blank, you could set that. Normally we'll do this stuff on outbound. And then tag mapper also, say you wanted to prefix any accession numbers, patient IDs, etc. That would be an option for you. The router targets then, this next tab, is where you set up your destinations. So I have a couple destinations just in this example router, but if I go in here, we're going to see that here's my target list, and you'd be able to select that. If you were doing a group where you had multiple storage nodes, like I had mentioned yesterday, this is where you'd select your group, and then we would do the load balancing, sending out to those groups. We could forward on to called AE, or we could forward on the calling AE. So this would be the modality's AE title. If you wanted your destination to see the calling AE title of the modality rather than the router AE title, that's where you'd configure this. And you could do that different per different target. So if you had 5 targets in here and to 2 of them you wanted to forward the calling AE, but on 3 of them you wanted just the DataFirst AE title, that's all configurable. You also have the scheduling. So if you only wanted to send to a specific target on non-peak hours, that's going to be an option for you. Blank accession numbers. So if you had where you did not want any blank accession numbers or blank patient IDs to go over to a destination, you would set that as a rule. And you can build these rules off of any of your standard DICOM fields. So if they're in the DICOM header, you're going to be able to build a rule for it. That's going to be the same for your tag mapper profile. If you wanted to say, add a suffix or a prefix to accession numbers, you might want to strip leading zeros off the session numbers. You're able to build that in the tag mapper profile and then associate that to your destination. And then the number of threads. How many threads do you actually want to send or connections to that target? It might take a little troubleshooting at first because you might have it set for 20 threads and your target just can't take that many, so then you have to go down to 10 threads. But it's all configurable and it'll take it on the fly. So once they're done there, then you just click it and it's going to be one of your router targets. Now we do through the router accept both DICOM, of course, but modality workless forwarding. So that's what my second target here is if your modality sends through a workless query, we're going to forward that on to the workless server, get the results, and send that back to the modality. So that's just another function that is available. Once you're done setting everything up, you just return to your main router, and it's going to actually come out and show you everything that you did. So now we can see my listening port, the router AE title. This happens to be source AEs that I've already sent through, and my destinations. And you can see the profiles then that you have attached to any of your destinations also. Once you start getting studies then, so you're going to start getting connections from your modalities. This is where you're going to spend a lot of your time, is under the association manager. As I specified earlier, the association manager is going to be inbound connections and outbound connections. So in this inbound associations tab, you're going to be able to see all the studies from the modalities that came in, see how many modalities it was, or what the modality was, the instances received, the study date, etc. And if I do the little info sign here, it's going to give you more information about that study. So you could come in here, see what the calling AE is, when it was received. If you go to the association tab, you're going to actually see for that context ID what the transfer syntax was. So this can be very helpful in not only just troubleshooting, but knowing what transfer syntax you're getting. So say that your source proposed 4 different transfer syntaxes, they would all be listed here. And then the one that with the green check mark would be the one that was actually accepted. Under the instances tab, you'd see all your instances. So this was a very basic study, just a single instance. You're going to see where we cache that instance. So if you needed to go copy it, maybe for a test exam or research or anything like that, and you wanted to forward it on, you could always just copy it from that location. But if we click on the little icon here to view image, it's going to pull up your image. And then you can actually see the image. You can go to the DICOM tags, see all the DICOM tags that were associated with it. And say you needed to modify in a session number. If you weren't doing it in Tag Mapper, you could also just come in here and modify and save it to that study and send it on. We'll also have a performance monitor, which does performance monitor to tell you if you had, say, 1,000 instances, it would show you how long it took to get all those instances in the time elapsed in milliseconds and the transfer rate that it took. So you're going to have all your associations in here. You're going to have all your filters, because once you start having 800 modalities sending through, it's going to get busy. So if you wanted to look for a specific, say, a session number, you could always copy out that session number, paste it in here, and filter it down, and that'd be available for you. Also, you're going to see these columns here. There's going to be the column dropdown. So say you thought it was too busy or you wanted to see a different column, you could come in here, select what you want to see, and then it is going to be saved to your user profile. On the outbound, then, this is going to be your outbound connections. So by the outbound connections, what I mean is you had those 2 different targets or 5 different targets that you're going to be sending to. This is going to show you each of those connections. And you can see the status. Okay, it complete. So it actually received 1 instance. It sent that full instance. In this case, it received 6 instances and it sent out all those instances. If you had any that, say, failed, you wanted to see what's been failing, you could just come to failed, filter that down. It's going to show you everything that failed. So then you could come over here then and you can reset it to ready. Maybe you were just consistently getting failures. You could reset it to just try to send it ELE, just uncompressed, just send it on, see if that target will accept it then. But there's also like a stat send. If it was 1,000 studies ahead of it, but you knew you needed to get that one over, you could do stat and it's going to forward it on to the top of the list. And your force send is going to bypass any time profiles that you might have set up, any logic that might be blocking a study. So you might set up a study thinking, oh, I don't want it to go through if it's not meeting this criteria, but then all of a sudden it's a stat case, you need to get it over there. Force send's just going to bypass everything that he has set up. And again, you have your columns that you can change all here. If I click on the icon again, or the info, you're again going to see study instance info itself, if it was successful, if it failed, etc. And if I do the plus, that's going to show you more information yet on that association or that attempt. What we're doing here is we are going to log each attempt that it took to send your study. Hopefully it's generally only 1 because everything's going to be successful to your destination. But if it did take multiple attempts, you'd see each of those listed here. And you'd see if any failed, if they were excluded, the sent date, and it was completed. When I click the info icon, you'll see more information, the instances attempt. If it failed, you'd actually see a comment here. So we'll go look at one of those quickly. And then your association of what it negotiated on outbound. Let's look at one of these. So this one was scheduled and then it failed. And it failed due to no connection could be made to the target machine. So in this case, I wanted it to fail actually for my testing. So I turned my target off and it's going to tell you, hey, I can't even communicate with it. So that would give you some troubleshooting to be able to go on. So that's going to be your inbound association manager. And you could have pages and pages of them. So again, like we mentioned earlier, you're going to have all your different filters that you can use. Worklist queries here. I had said previously that we could be a worklist query forwarder. That's exactly what this would show you. If the modality sent in a worklist query, we queried that modality or that worklist server, that was a criteria, it would tell us the number of records that it returned back to the modality. So that can be helpful. And then your study manager is going to be close to what your association manager is, but what it's going to do is how I'd mentioned previously that you might have a modality that sends through multiple associations per study. It's going to log all those associations under one study so that it's not so busy and you can just come in here and send the whole study rather than each individual association. We have some different prefetch modules where you might do like keyword mapping. Maybe you just needed to get an idea of what was relevant to each. We have the little skeletal system in here. Some utilities that are available would be maybe an ad hoc cfind, an ad hoc cmove. If you just want to ping echo one of your servers that you have available, you can come in here, make sure you actually have an active connection to them. Under your settings, this is where you'd actually set up some of the basics. hospital name, maybe a temp storage drive, etc. And then in settings, this is where you configure your host. So, okay, by host, what I mean are all your destinations or all your DICOM modality workload servers. Somehow Silverback's going to have to know about these. So you're going to configure them here, and then you would associate those up in that configuration screen that we were in earlier. All those modalities that I said were going to be logged are going to be logged in here. So you can come in and get all those for you. Storage paths. So, okay, where do you want your cache to be going is available. And stations, this would be more for high availability. So for the high availability, you could have a primary station, a secondary station, a third station, and you could have those all be an active. So if they're getting studies from, say, your load balancer or just from the modality itself, it's going to keep track each one of them to each study so that you can, even if it failed on one, you could go to the other server as long as it's shared cache, and you could send it from that router rather than the router it actually came into. Source of truth, if you had an extract from an EMR where you were updating patient IDs, session numbers, etc., your source of truth would be able to actually get that extract, you would import it into the source of truth table, and then it would do those updates for you on outbound. Kind of want to mention compression profiles. So you could create your own specific compression profiles, and you could build them inbound, outbound. So if you wanted to always get something inbound at ELE, you'd make a compression profile, and you would put that to your inbound route. That's what it's going to try to negotiate at. And you could do it on outbound also. Your scheduler. So I had mentioned that you could do different schedules. So if you wanted to add a different hours one, you could come in here, build it as out. It's almost like an Outlook calendar that you'd build out. And your tag mapper is going to be where you'd make different tag mapping. So like I said, you can do it on almost any DICOM tag that would be available. You would just start typing in here what you want. It's going to filter it down to whatever's needed. And then you'd be able to say, is it equal? Does it have to equal a length, present, etc.? And you just build out what you want it to do so that you'd be able to attach that to your destination and have that action done on outbound. Really the same premise for rules is you could come in here and you can build a new one, or I'm just going to use one I already have. You could build different rules. That'd be a session number. I'm going to block it, or do I want to pass it? It's in the drop down. That you want can not be absent and it cannot be empty. So if it were either of those criteria, Silverback's going to block it before it can go out to a destination. And you can build, say, anonymization rules, etc. in here. Otherwise, we do have some presets where here's just built-in anonymization rule that you could attach. Or if you had some developers or coders on your team, they could build their own C# script and import them and be able to use those. Everything that's being done is actually tracked in your system log. So your system log is going to show all your associations inbound, everything outbound, if anything failed. So it's a great place to come in and find information about your associations and your studies that have been going through the router. So that real quickly was kind of a brief overview of what the router can do. As Dennis said, if you're interested, we can always do a more in-depth dive in, but we think we can open it for Q&A.
So I appreciate everybody dropping on by today for the live recorded web demo of the Silverback Workflow Engine. We will capture any of the questions that you have, and then we will make sure that we follow up via email. You could also email me any of your questions at dennis.schiraldi. And I will put this in the email or into the chat at datafirst.com. So if you have any questions, you can always email me at dennis.schiraldi@datafirst.com. I'll make sure that we go ahead and follow up appropriately. Thank you once again for everybody for dropping on into our virtual web demo. If you'd like to see a more specific demo of the Silverback Workflow Engine, you can also shoot me a quick email and we will make sure that we get that arranged. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.